Hi, I'm Scientific Illustrator Stephanie Rozzo. Welcome to Nature Sketch Creates Go Out and Sketch a Spinner Dolphin instructional video. In this video, I'll be showing you how to sketch a spinner dolphin by applying what you learned in your step-by-step lesson. Follow along with this lesson even if you don't have the lesson kit. Help this tiny business by purchasing lesson kits at naturesketchcreate.com and clicking that like button, subscribing to this YouTube channel. First, make sure you have all the materials you need before you go out to sketch. Head out and sketch an aquarium or from an HG video home. Today, I'm sketching from a composite video of a dolphin for demonstrative purposes. Remember, this is just a sketch. Take your time, relax, and don't worry too much about accuracy. Let's get started. So, you want to apply what you know about spinner dolphins from your step-by-step lesson and your Spinner Dolphin About Me page. And before you actually start sketching, think about how big you want the dolphin on your page and where you want it positioned or what position you might want it to be in. And before you even start this, it's a good idea to do several sketches on some plain paper to warm up and get a better idea of how big and what position and where you want that dolphin to be. So you want to first draw a light, rough sketch of the animal, starting with the outline and just some simple shapes to capture what this dolphin looks like. So the main body is just kind of a half circle here, and then just a little bit of a half circle here, creating a bit of an oval. And just use really light marks. That way you can change them a little later without erasing. You don't want to erase a lot because it's hard on the watercolor paper. Then go ahead and start adding in some other parts with some simple shapes. So you can think, okay, this front part of the dolphin is here to the dorsal fin. And you can start adding the dorsal fin in. And if it's too big or too small, that's okay. You can change it. Just use light marks to change it. And then as you define that a bit more, you can make the marks a little bit darker. So the back flipper ends right about here. So I can draw a little line there. And then the other flippers come here. And then it's about there. So I'm creating a new shape just where the flippers are in relation to the dorsal fin and the body itself. Just kind of mapping it out a little bit. And then I'll start adding the flipper in, the front one. And I'm not worried too much about getting this exact. It's just a sketch. It's just a representation of this animal. And it doesn't need to be exact. And you see I'm using some slightly darker marks to indicate that. And I can figure out where the eye is in relation to this front flipper here, and kind of where in relation to the dorsal fin. And the eye runs, I think I'm right about there, and I can change it if that's not quite right. And I don't want to overthink it too much, but if it looks really strange, I can change it a little bit. Drawing in some light marks. And then adding another line here, goes down to the eye. And again, not being exact, just adding these in an approximate fashion. Getting an idea of this animal, not an exact drawing. And make some darker marks to indicate where things are supposed to be, the correct lines. Lots of little quick sketchy lines that are really light. And just use the different parts to figure out where things are supposed to be, so and how big they are. So you can look at this dorsal fin compared to the size of this body, compared to this size, to kind of decide where it's supposed to be. You can also use your hands by raising your fingers in front of your face and kind of spacing it out a little bit like that, or maybe your pencil and put it in front of the animal, in front of your eyes, between you and the animal, and then figure out how big it is in relation to your pencil, and then take it down onto your paper, and then you can draw that out as well. So there's a few different ways to get the right size. Starting with the basic outline helps. Sketches tend to get things a little bit off anyway. Just quick representation. It's not going to be exact. Just an idea of this animal. Especially if the animal is moving, makes it especially hard to draw it. But you can get it with practice. And if the animal leaves, you can always add in some of the details based on what you know, especially the color. So it's nice to be able to add it while the animal's there if you're drawing it in person, painting this in person. I think overall this is a pretty good representation. Something a little off about the tail. Just have to wait till it's in the right position to add that detail in. Sometimes you have to do that if you're sketching in person as well. And this is a little off too. Overall, you can look at it a few times, just make sure that it's what I want it to be. I think overall that's going to be a pretty good sketch. Close enough, and so I'm going to go ahead and write Spinner Dolphin down below just for consistency. I'm going to add the common name and the scientific name. And you can add some observations to the outside here. Maybe something isn't quite right with your drawing, maybe the animal left, and so you're making some things up a little bit based on what you know about dolphins and spinner dolphins. Maybe you were feeling a certain way when you were sketching, or saw the dolphin do something in particular that you couldn't capture in your sketch. Maybe there's something around you you want to note that you observed while you're creating this sketch. This is your sketch, this is your journal. Please make sure to make it your own by adding whatever you like on the outside. Sometimes people also blow certain details up, so maybe you want a close-up of the eye and you're able to see that, or some part of the flipper, maybe the back flukes here, you want to show it in motion. So lots of different ideas, lots of different possibilities. So I'm going to leave my sketch like this for simplicity and consistency. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to adding some paint. So now I'm going to add some paint, and I always like to have the paints with me just in case I need to revive them a little bit make them more vibrant. So maybe they lost some of their luminosity when they were dried out. And I used my brush to add some water to all of these to revive them. And I'm going to go ahead and start adding it similar fashion as what I did with the step-by-step. And the color is a little bit different because this dolphin is underwater instead of above water like was sketched for the step-by-step. So I'm just going to start with that lightest color first. I'm going to check it out on my test paper. I need a little bit more water to that. That looks good. Pick some up, dab it off on my towel, and just add it to the whole space like you would with a marker. Just kind of filling it in. I'm going to avoid the eye. And I'm not being really exact. I'm not too worried about a little fuzz. Just going to take that off. And I'm not worrying too much about the lines that might be left from drying, like here. There's a few edges. I like those inconsistencies in this sketch, and it's just meant to be quick and simple. So next, I'm going to go ahead and add the next color. This should dry really fast because I'm not using a lot of water onto the paper itself. And that's done by when I pick up the really watered down lighter color, which has more water to it and less pigment in my palette, I'm dabbing it off onto my towel to get rid of some of that water but keep that pigment. And then I apply it, making it so that it dries faster. If you put too much water onto the paper itself, it'll start buckling a little bit. That is not really something that you want, but if you have that problem, you can tape down the edges to help prevent that. You can tape it down onto a hard surface like your sketchbook. And you'll want to use that painter's tape because it's very gentle on the watercolor paper, and you just tape down all the edges onto the hard surface, and that will prevent that buckling from happening. When you're sketching, it's helpful to use less water so that the drying time before you add more color is less, because the animal will probably be gone or in a different position, and you want to be able to do this as quickly as possible. So next I'm going to take the next color. This is dry. Dab your finger over it. Don't run your finger over it because that could smudge the paint if it's still wet. Pick up a little of that color, test it out on my paper. It still looks a little dark, so I'm going to put a little bit more water in my palette, dab it off, and test it out again. It looks a bit better, a little lighter. I pick that up, and I'm going to add it to all these darker areas. And the dolphin I'm painting today is different from the dolphin I was painting for the step-by-step, so I'll try to refer to both the colors I used for my step-by-step, but I'm looking at the dolphin in front of me for the placement of this color. I'm going to clean off the brush. this lighter color, test it out again, to the middle of the body, this side section. And this dolphin's pretty dark into the belly, so I'm going to add a little bit into the belly as well. And that's probably because it's underwater. And I'm starting at this line and kind of moving it up and down as needed. The paint pigment will run out of my brush a little bit as I paint. Oops, picked up the wrong one, that's okay, I'll test it out. A little dark, but not too much. This is dry, so I'm gonna go ahead and add that darker color again. I'm gonna start in this dorsal fin. It's really dark compared to everything else on this dolphin. Starting at this line where the darker area starts on the top, because this dolphin there's a bit of a gradient, so I'm adding that in, and then I'm cleaning off my brush to get rid of any pigment, and then taking that clean damp brush and just running it over. If I need to add that to make it a little bit darker, I can. I'm going to darken this color up a little bit, test it out. While it's still wet, I can take this darker color and just kind of deepen that up, and then it'll kind of bleed into those areas that are still wet, creating again a little bit of a gradient going up. I'm going to do a little bit more down here with dorsal fin. And then on this one, this tip of the tail flukes has some dark color on it, and so does kind of the edge here. But those areas are a little darker than everything else, and it does kind of look like it bleeds together to me, so I'm going to leave that, let it kind of bleed a little bit. So again, I'm doing this while it's still kind of wet. I'm going to add one more layer of that and let it kind of bleed. And then I'm going to take an even darker color and add it to this dorsal fin. So the dorsal fin is really dark on this dolphin. And I'm going to let it bleed into that to create a little bit of a gradient. Clean off my brush and then move that paint a little bit to smooth out that edge. This back part is really dark, so I'm going to add some paint there, letting it bleed in. And this flipper is just really dark as well. And the edges of this flipper are dark. And this area here. And that kind of is a gradient in the center, so I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush and move that paint a little bit, smooth it out, creating a little bit of a gradient again. Adding some more of this dark color, testing it whenever needed to this stripe again. And then this stripe has a little bit of a dark color to it too, so I'm going to add that in there, and then take that clean damp brush and kind of move it throughout. And I love all these inconsistencies in the color, letting it kind of move around. Just adds a really fun style. Add a little bit more. This whole tail peduncle area is dark, so I'm going to go ahead and go real dark with that real quick. Adding it in there, not worry too much about it. Merging a little bit. Blending that in. And it's dark around the tail flukes. And then on the bottom of the tail fluke here and this tip. So I'm just slowly building up this color, making it darker and darker in the areas that I see that on my dolphin. And so I got some of that dark into the middle here, and I don't really want that, so I'm going to take it in my brush, clean damp brush, and just kind of move that throughout and redistribute it a little bit. So I'll clean that off, and you can also take a Q-tip or your towel and kind of dab it over that spot to remove that color as well. And I feel like it's a little more dramatic, this color change here, so I'm going to go ahead and go for a little bit more drama there by adding a darker color. Just in that one spot, it's still a little wet. And letting it bleed, because I see it's a little more of a gradient in the dolphin itself, so I'm letting that color just kind of bleed down a little bit. And the same thing here. So I'm applying this while it's still wet, letting it bleed around into those other areas to create that little bit of a gradient, some texture as well. This is really dark, so I'm going to add a little bit more, a little too dark. Take it cleaned off my brush and taking a clean damp brush to the dorsal fin on this dolphin is much darker than everything else, and this back flipper appears darker as well. It's good to get those extremes, and then here. As well. So just a few places, really dark color. And having some darks against the lights, a little bit of contrast creates a little more 3-dimension to your picture, which is what you want. You want it to look 3-dimensional. Let that bleed a little bit in that wet area. And a little bit darker there. And again, make this a little darker. And the top area is not wet, so it's not really bleeding in there anymore. So I'm going to just take that clean damp brush and move that paint up. I added a little bit more water to my brush, and now I'm going to add a little bit of this pink color to the belly, even though I don't really see it, just to be like our step-by-step. Test it out on my paper. And I'm going to add a little bit more of this light gray in there as well. I'm okay with it blending out the pink. And I'm going to add this darker color one more time to the dorsal fin. It's so dark compared to the others parts. So is this flipper and part of the tail as well. And it might be because it's underwater, so that's something you could note that on the side. It's really dark compared to your reference dolphin, or any other changes or differences that you see or observe compared to your reference sketch step by step. Come on, just bring this a little bit darker. Again, dabbing my brush off and then creating a bit of a gradient. And I think I like the way that looks, so I'm going to move on to adding some ink. You can always go back and add more paint later as well. And And I'll let this dry before I add the ink lines. So next I'm going to add some ink lines, and I'm going to draw the outline of the dolphin. I'm not going to include these areas here because it's already dark enough with the paint. And I am going to go ahead and go around these flippers here and these as well, these back flippers with the tail flukes and the dorsal fin. Basically the outside, and I'm going to draw the eye in with a little bit more detail and of course refine the beak a bit. And I start with the smaller tipped micron, so if I make any mistakes I can go back and change them later with my larger microns. And I'm still referring to my dolphin reference for creating these lines. And I don't have to stay within where the paint landed. I can recreate those boundaries. Some of the paint can be on the outside with this style of painting, sketchy. And again, it's not going to be exact, so don't worry too much about getting things exact. It's just an approximate sketch. Then it might be hard to get some of those details in for this animal because one, it's moving, and two, it might be gone. So don't worry too much about that. Just get this nice representation of this animal onto your paper. Sketchy representation. But this is the time when you can bring it all together. And I'm going to add a little bit of white area on the eye, a little more lifelike than just having the black part. I can't really see a lot of the details in my sketch. I could draw those in based on my step-by-step, but I'm just going to leave them out. And I think that the beak is a little thinner, so I'm just going to draw in some lines a little bit more to thin that a little bit. Again, this is a sketch. And you can move your paper around, make it easier to draw. Try to keep mine still for the camera. Again, not worrying about where the paint landed. Just drawing things in. Like this should be a lot thinner, and that's okay. So I drew a line that's wrong, but it's fine. I might make a little note about that, or just it's going to be there, just an extra little thing that's there, and that's okay. It's just a sketch. Next, I'm going to take the 01 0.401 micron, and it's black as well. I'm going to redraw the common name and scientific name. Maybe I'll make the writing a little neater, maybe not. And you can leave your observations in pencil. I just like to put these in ink for consistency for our step-by-step lesson. I think I'm going to go ahead and start adding some thicker lines with the 0.8 micron. Just want to be careful with this one. It does tend to smudge, and this is anywhere I see needs some heavier, darker areas, so there's a lot of shadow. Or this back flipper, I can just kind of fill that in as just a black space. And then you know that the shape of this flipper is defined that way. And then I'm going to add a little deeper line here just to separate the front and the back flipper more than anything else. So now it really separates that. And I'm going to define the eye a little bit to make it pop, just this bottom part. And I'm going to line the beak a little. You don't want to outline everything, it'll make it very flat. So some of the places where there's some darker lines, I'm going to go ahead and add those in. Now you want some line inconsistencies. So a mixture of thin and thick lines just gives it a little more of a three-dimensional, it's like with the light and dark colors. And I'm going to go back to using my 0.1 micron and just thicken this line here under the belly a little bit. Not a lot, and maybe this line here on the top as well in the cape area. Maybe some here as well in the beak. I might go over that again with the 0.8 micron too. And I'll take this 0.8 micron. Black on the tip beak there. And then I'm going to add in a little bit of a thicker common name, so it's a little bit more like our step-by-step lesson. And I like where this is at. You can, of course, add more ink lines or paint. Make sure to add your observations or thoughts or feelings on the outside, or add additional drawings and little paintings, like maybe the tail's positioning. You can draw part of that tail here and here. You can do it in pencil, or you can do pencil and some watercolor. Make some marks and observations, anything that you like. Thank you for joining me. Please share your art on our Facebook fan art page and use the hashtag #NatureCreateArt to have it featured on our social media. If you have any questions or comments, or like to see a plant or animal featured in a future lesson, please let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and check out naturesketchcrate.com to shop for future lesson crates. Great job observing your world and keep practicing.